In the spring of 1944, General Douglas MacArthur's Allied forces tried to seize more land on the island of New Guinea, but a beach intended for landing was destroyed by a single Japanese bomb. By April 1944, American and Australian forces began advancing westward along the northern coast of New Guinea, reclaiming land the Japanese had taken in early 1942. After tough battles to take Gona, Buna, and Sanananda in eastern Papua New Guinea, MacArthur had successfully captured Salamaua and Finschhafen in northeastern New Guinea by late 1942 and early 1943. Following that, the Japanese supply facility at Sidor, located 52 miles east of the key Japanese base at Madang, also fell to MacArthur's forces. Unable to commit troops for a decisive defense at Madang, the retreating Japanese withdrew further west as the Australians continued their push toward Madang. Meanwhile, MacArthur focused on the coastal areas of Wewak and Aitape in northeastern New Guinea and Hollandia, along the border in Dutch New Guinea. By this time, the Allies had gained control of the skies and seas around New Guinea. Although there were still around 60,000 Japanese troops on the island, they faced severe shortages in supplies and suffered from low morale. On the other hand, the Allied forces were growing stronger. By early 1944, MacArthur had command over 5 Australian divisions, 3 American regimental combat teams, 3 engineer special brigades, and 5 U.S. Army divisions. He also had at his disposal a large naval fleet including warships, transport vessels, cargo ships, and landing craft in his 7th Fleet, along with around 1,000 combat aircraft in his 5th Air Force. Rather than attack Wewak, where Japanese forces were massing, MacArthur proposed a bold move. Advance 275 kilometers up the coast to seize Aitape, which contained 3 Japanese airfields. He saw this location as the next landing site and aimed to capture Hollandia, a vital Japanese air and supply base, by sending 2 divisions under Lieutenant General Robert L. Eichelberger's Bar Corps 125 miles further west. Allied codebreakers using stolen Japanese codebooks learned that the 3 airfields near Hollandia were poorly defended. MacArthur planned to land behind enemy lines and bypass Wewak, trapping Japanese forces between advancing American troops and the Australian units pushing westward on land. 2 landing zones were chosen in the Hollandia area. One was Tanamera Bay, located on the western side of a land bulge formed by the Cyclops Mountains. The airfield sat on a strip of terrain between Lake Sentani, a large winding body of water, and the southern edge of the Cyclops Mountains, which appeared to be lightly defended. Major General Frederick A. Irving's 24th Infantry Division was assigned to storm ashore at Red Beaches 1 and 2, then push inland along a known Old Dutch route toward the airfields. Simultaneously, another landing was planned at Humboldt Bay, on the eastern side of the Cyclops Mountains protrusion. Major General Horace H. Fuller's 41st Infantry Division, composed of National Guard troops, would land at White Beaches 1 through 4. White Beaches 1 and 2 lay on a narrow strip of land about 21 miles south of Hollandia town. This site was designated for the main landing force and was expected to be better defended. Each beach was approximately 700 yards long and 100 yards deep, backed by a mangrove swamp on a narrow finger of land separating larger Humboldt Bay from the smaller, more hidden Joutafa Bay. White Beach 3 was another landing area, located on the northwest side of Joutafa Bay, near the small native settlement of Pim. Pim marked the beginning of a road leading to the eastern shore of Lake Sentani, and also had a jetty. While most troops were landing at White Beaches 1 and 2, one battalion using amphibious tractors and vehicles known as DUKWs would land at White Beach 3, move around the finger-shaped peninsula, enter Joutafa Bay, and land again near Pim at White Beach 4. Throughout March and early April, MacArthur directed numerous air raids and some naval bombardments to keep the Japanese believing that Wewak would be the next target. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General George C. Kenney's 5th Air Force conducted strikes that destroyed nearly all 350 Japanese aircraft defending the Hollandia airfields. On April 20th, the 3 invasion convoys assembled at Manus Island, planning to arrive at Humboldt Bay, Tanamera Bay, and Itape on April 22nd. The ships carrying the Itape-bound force, known as the Persecution Task Force, split off and sailed southeast toward their landing zones. The remaining vessels, tasked with the Hollandia assault and designated the Reckless Task Force, continued on course. At 1:30 a.m. on April 22nd, D-Day, the convoys broke apart. The Central Attack Group carrying the 41st Division approached Humboldt Bay, while the Western Group carrying the 24th Division headed toward Tanamera Bay. Supporting aircraft from carrier-based forces began bombing and strafing enemy positions, and the naval ships started their pre-invasion shelling at dawn. There were about 7,600 Japanese troops in the area, but only around 1 in 10 carried a rifle. Caught completely off guard, most of the enemy forces fled into the jungle. As the first soldiers of the 24th Division landed at Red Beaches 1 and 2, barely a single rifle shot was heard. There was almost no enemy resistance. While follow-up waves came ashore, the initial units searched for the old Dutch road that was supposed to lead them from the beach to the airfields near Lake Sentani. However, they quickly discovered that the road didn't exist. Naval historian Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison later remarked that there was no way to move men or equipment off the beach other than the way they came, comparing it to landing at the base of a sheer cliff. During the pre-invasion bombardment at Humboldt Bay, a Japanese ammunition dump was hit, starting a fire that was visible from far out at sea. Landing Control Officer Captain Byron Anderson noted that 2 infantry companies reached White Beach 1 just 2 minutes behind schedule. A reinforced rifle platoon followed at White Beach 2, securing the southern approach to Jautefa Bay. Another rifle company landed at White Beach 3 on the southern tip of the narrow land finger. Like the landings at Tanamera Bay, the beach at White Beach 3 was about 200 feet deep and stretched for around a mile. Captain Anderson reported that White Beach 1 was covered with a vast amount of Japanese supplies, including food, ammunition, and aerial bombs. An infantryman from the 41st Division confirmed the scene. "We found the largest Japanese ammunition dump we had ever seen. There was no resistance when we landed at Humboldt Bay." As the Japanese supply depot burned quickly, the 41st Division advanced north toward Hollandia town and west toward Lake Sentani and the airfields. Meanwhile, the 24th Division made its way east along narrow roads, none of which were suitable for carrying supplies. Since the 41st Division faced fewer obstacles, General Irving, commander of the 24th Division, decided to send follow-up supplies to Humboldt Bay on the second day. White Beaches 1 and 2 were now responsible for supplying both divisions. After moving inland from the crowded beaches and capturing Pancake Hill, a small elevation north of the beach peninsula, the 41st Division reached Hollandia by evening. The Japanese resistance was weak, even at this point. The 116th Engineer Battalion landed at White Beach 1 and attempted to build an escape lane from the beach. Most of the engineers were unloading 7 large landing ships that had brought in supplies. However, the sand was too soft for wheeled vehicles, and the swampy ground behind the beach made road construction difficult. Japanese night fighters targeted the large ships, forcing rapid unloading and evacuation. Supplies began to stack up quickly, as there was no escape route. Mountains of food, ammunition, oil, and other essentials piled up on White Beaches 1 and 2. On April 23rd, the second day of the operation, the 41st Division launched an offensive against Hollandia. By 11:15 a.m., they had taken control of the town beneath the Cyclops Mountains. However, advancing troops from both the 24th and 41st Divisions met heavy Japanese resistance as they pushed along narrow native trails toward Lake Sentani and 3 enemy airfields. By evening, they were still far from reaching their objectives. Back at the beaches, confusion reigned. Historian Robert Ross Smith described how more troops, vehicles, and supplies poured onto the beaches. 3 infantry companies and the 532nd Engineer Boat and Shore Regiment brought ashore more than 4,200 tons of ammunition, fuel, rations, and over 300 vehicles. The congestion worsened, and little progress could be made in building escape routes. The supplies were stacked close to the burning Japanese supply dumps. Later that afternoon, the 532nd Engineers reported transporting around 500 tons of supplies directly from some landing ships to a jetty at Pinja Bay using amphibious vehicles. Just after sunset, around 8:45 p.m., a lone Japanese aircraft flew too low to be detected by radar and dropped 3 bombs on White Beach 1, likely guided by the light from the fires still burning at the Japanese supply dump. 2 bombs landed harmlessly in the sand, but one hit a Japanese ammo store at the base of Pancake Hill. Captain Eugene File of the 92nd Evacuation Hospital was in a foxhole on Pancake Hill and described it as a night to remember. A series of powerful explosions followed, shaking the ground even a mile away. The explosions triggered fires that spread to an American gasoline dump, setting off more fires among the supplies and sending flames and debris in every direction. During the night, 30 men and 1 officer from the 287th Ordnance Maintenance Company were killed, and another officer was injured. The surviving team members began rolling gasoline barrels into the harbor once the wounded were evacuated. 2 technical surgeons tried to clear the fire's path of critical anti-aircraft weapons and other equipment, while bulldozers were used to build a fire break. Bulldozer operators dumped supplies and gasoline drums into the sea. Engineers noted that gasoline drums were rolled aside to create a 30-yard wide open strip from the beach through the burning area. Human chains passed supplies from person to move them to safety. Conveyor rollers were quickly assembled. Personnel from the 116th Engineer Combat Battalion worked non-stop to build the fire break. The men risked their lives to save what they could, working just 75 yards from the fire. They had a 20-ton TNT dump 100 yards behind them and were surrounded by flames and gasoline. The collecting platoon of Company B 262 Medical Battalion set up an aid station right in the middle of the dump area to make it accessible from any part of the beach. 44 men and 2 policemen worked tirelessly to rescue and treat the wounded. As soon as the Japanese munitions exploded, litter bearers carried the injured through the chaos. Their unit was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for their bravery in rescuing fellow soldiers while under constant threat from flying debris and fire. Some stayed at the aid station to treat the wounded while others went back into the flames to bring in more casualties. Members of the 41st Division's military police helped with evacuation. One MP remembered that most of them ran barefoot and unclothed from their camp toward the beaches. 2 MPs had to crawl 1,500 yards through burning oil, gas, and ammo explosions to reach safety. One of them was wounded in the arm, shoulder, and thigh. The fire had cut off their path. When he removed his jacket, it fell apart, and his back was covered in blisters, blood, and sweat. The 41st Division's historian reported that at first the fire break seemed to work, but another ammunition dump caught fire. As it exploded, bullets and metal shards flew across the beach. The fire jumped the 30-yard gap as if it wasn't even there. The historian for the 2nd Engineer Special Brigade noted that explosions kept raining deadly debris onto the shore. Bravery was everywhere on White Beach 1. Amid the spreading fires, efforts were made to shelter and feed soldiers who had become separated from their units during the rough night. More medical teams arrived to give first aid. They worked to save those brought in under dangerous conditions. According to a division historian, litter bearers moved through the blazing dumps to rescue the wounded, even while metal fragments fell from the sky. The aid station had to be moved several times due to the fire. Once all survivors were evacuated, the firefighting had to stop. It was just too risky. No one who saw the fire at White Beach 1, started by a Japanese bomb, would ever forget it. Major Venau said that after the engineers finished rescuing who they could, they had no choice but to abandon the beach because of the extreme heat. Amid the threat of exploding munitions, the raging fire reached its peak, creating a terrifying scene of destruction that left everyone breathless. Even as fires and explosions roared, the crew began unloading 12 LSTs that were waiting offshore. Most of the large ships had run aground in the bay while trying to land at White Beach 2. Only one ship was fully unloaded on April 24th. The remaining 11 raced to the beach the following day, grounding themselves in shallow water during high tide with sheer determination. By evening, all but 2 had offloaded successfully. To avoid further supply congestion at White Beach 1, logistics teams began transporting supplies and ammunition by LVTs across Jautefa Bay to White Beach 4. Captain Anderson noted that the fires and explosions continued until D+4. Numerous vehicles, equipment, and nearly all Japanese materials within the fire's perimeter were destroyed. The majority of the supplies, ammunition, and rations landed on D-Day, and D+1 were also lost, amounting to nearly 60% of what had been allocated to the 41st Division for the entire Hollandia campaign. By D+5, April 27th, when the fires had subsided enough to allow cleanup and future landing preparations, it became clear that resupply wouldn't reach Hollandia for at least another week. General Eichelberger radioed a request to duplicate all bulk stores previously offloaded at Humboldt Bay on D-Day and D+1. He also ordered a reduction in combat activity and food rations until further notice. Troops were informed they would receive only 1/3 of their normal rations, just 1 box of K rations per day. Infantryman Francis Catanzaro recalled how all patrols were tasked with searching nearby buildings for any surviving Japanese rations. For about a week, the ration shortage hit hard. Ironically, many soldiers felt the lack of cigarettes even more than the food shortage. They managed to find some bags of rice and canned fish, which helped them endure the crisis. But each K ration box had only 4 cigarettes, which were the only supply available, aside from a few Japanese ones discovered in enemy quarters. Catanzaro, who didn't smoke, later reflected on how powerful tobacco addiction could be and how badly most smokers suffered when their supply ran out. It was estimated that 11 LST loads of materials were lost in the fire, an enormous blow to the 41st Division. The disaster injured over 100 soldiers and killed 24 men. The toll might have been higher were it not for the heroic actions of several officers and soldiers. 6 officers from the 532nd Engineer Boat and Shore Regiment received the Silver Star for bravery, while 3 other officers and 23 enlisted men were awarded the Bronze Star for their actions during what came to be known as the Holocaust of Hollandia. Despite the devastation on the beach, the infantry's momentum was not stalled. On April 25th and 26th, troops were flown across Lake Sentani by LVTs and landed beneath the enemy airfields. By April 26th, all 3 key airfields had been captured with only light resistance. In the days that followed, American patrols advanced with little opposition. Soon, the captured airfields were operational, supporting General Kenny's 5th Air Force aircraft. On April 22nd, the first day of the Hollandia assault, regiments from both the 32nd and 41st Infantry Divisions landed without facing any Japanese resistance. Within 2 days, they had seized all 3 of the enemy's airfields. Australian fighter squadrons quickly joined the effort, pushing Japanese forces further west into New Guinea's interior. Engineers even managed to put one of the airstrips into service shortly after the takeover. Despite the beach being